This is the video for Algebra 1, Unit 6, Lesson 3. And in this lesson, they introduce graphing your quadratic functions. Thankfully, we're going to utilize the Desmos graphing calculator to help us do this. And I'm going to show you how to use the graphing calculator on Desmos during this video lesson. But just look up here at the top and make sure that you are noting this. I'll put the link to the calculator in the lesson video description. But I'm going to start off by looking at an equation very similar to the one that you're given in the lesson. So in your lesson, you are given an equation and you're asked to do a lot of things with this equation. So we're going to talk through each one of those questions. So I'm actually following the pattern of the questions in lesson 3. So my recommendation to you would be to use this as a guide for doing what I'm doing here with the equation that you're given. You are not given the equation x squared minus y equals 4x plus 12. You're given another equation. But everything I'm doing will be very similar to what you will do. So you could almost follow this video step by step. So the first thing they ask us to do is to put this equation in quadratic form. Quadratic form. That's the first question. And that means that it needs to be in the following format. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. In other words, the y needs to be moved over here by itself, and the x's need to be on the other side. Okay, so I'm actually going to grab that and move it down. Let's move this guy down. All right, so we'll get there. But for now, let's talk about how we're going to do that. So clearly, moving the y or moving the x squared away from this y is one of the things we need to do. So again, this is some basic algebra skills, but when we move, if you'll remember in algebra, we need to imagine that this is an imaginary line separating two parts of the equation. And when I do something on one side, I have to do it the other. So if I want to get this x squared over, I have to do the opposite of that. So I'm going to subtract x squared, and I'm going to do it to both sides of the equation. So this is going to cancel out, leaving me with negative y on this side equals, and then there is going to be a temptation to want to try to combine the 4x and the x squared, but these are not compatible. They are not the same. So actually, all we're going to do is we're just going to rewrite this equation like this. Negative x squared plus 4x plus 12. So all I did was just slip that x squared in front of this equation, and I am going to, again, try to get it to look like this equation down here. I'm already getting close. I have y by itself. I have the x squareds, the 4x, and the constant term 12 on its own. The problem is this negative right here with the y is a problem. I got to get rid of this. So there's a really easy way to do that. Anytime you want to get rid of a negative, you can just multiply the entire equation by -1. Another way of saying that is to change the sign for every single one of these. I can change every sign. Negatives become positives, positives become negatives. So if I were to do that here, the negative y would become positive y. The negative x squared would become positive x squared. The positive 4x would become minus 4x. And the 12 would become minus 12. So all I've done is changed each one of the signs from that equation there. And now this is exactly where we want it to be. It is in the form y equals ax squared bx plus c. Now notice these plus signs, you might be thinking, well, those aren't plus signs there, they're minuses now. That is true. But this generic form doesn't mean it has to be a plus, it's just the way it's written. But what does matter is that the y is positive. So make sure you do that. So this is our equation right here. So that would be the first thing to do. That's number 1. So when you get to this step, you've got the answer to number 1 in your lesson, not this equation, but the one you did in yours. So then looking at the next question, it says determine the direction of the parabola. So determine the direction of the parabola is really going to be focused on whether or not the graph opens up. Let me make this a little thicker. Does the graph of the parabola open up or down? So the way you know that is whether or not the x squared is positive or the x squared is negative. So this right here tells you exactly what you need to know about the direction. If the x squared, like we have here, is a positive x squared, then the graph opens up. And if it's a negative x squared, the graph opens down. And so what we'd say is, in this case, we'd say if a is greater than 0, and I'll write that. Let me just add that in here. In other words, if a is greater than 0, then we have that. And if a is less than 0, then we have this one. So I will be posting these notes so you have this for yourself. That's how you answer question number 2. So let's keep going. Then it says, find the axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is they give us a formula. And the formula is this: x equals negative b over 2a. So again, let's go back up here real quick. B and a are here and here in our equation. So for us, we're going to go ahead and figure this out right now. B is negative 4. So I'm going to do negative 4. You're like, oh, there's a lot of negatives there. That's okay. And then 2a. Well, you might say, well, there is no a value here with this x squared right here. Well, we know that anytime a variable does not have a number in front, we know there's a 1 there. So this is a 1. So I'm going to put a 2 times 1 right there. And then let's work this out. So I have negative 4. These are going to cancel each other out. I would do that in a different color. So these are going to cancel out, leaving me with 4 over 2 times 1, which is 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So 2 is our answer for the axis of symmetry. And it's going to be specifically x equals 2. That's going to be our answer right there. Okay. So that's question number 3. Then they ask us to find the vertex. You can see these take some time. I'm going to show you how to graph them and make them a lot quicker in a second. So with the vertex, we take this x value right here, and we take this x equals 2, and we go back to our original equation right here. I'm going to rewrite it. We have y equals x squared minus 4x minus 12. And we're going to take this 2, and we're going to put it here and here. So let's do that. Y equals 2 squared minus 4 times 2 minus 12. Plug that in. We work it out. 2 squared is 4. 2 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. And then minus 12. And then we just add these up. 4 minus 8 minus 12. That's going to be negative 16. Okay, that's our answer for the y value. So y equals negative 16, which means that our vertex is our vertex is 2, negative 16. So that is the vertex. Again, the 2 comes from this x up here, and this negative 16 comes from this down here. All right, so we're going to pause there. So I've shown you how, I'm going to go back up here and talk about what we've done so far. I've shown you how to put things in quadratic form by rearranging the equation. Then we took that information and we found out, how does the graph open? What is the axis of symmetry? What is the vertex? Right here. Now we're going to jump over, and I'm going to make a little bit of a change, and we're going to jump over to the Desmos graphing system. Let me open this up. So in Desmos, we're actually going to take this equation right here, x squared minus 4x minus 12. That's why it's important to write things down. And we're going to put it right in here. So we have y equals x squared minus 4x minus 12. You can also use the keyboard that pops up on the screen. Let me just go ahead and show you how that would work. We would do y equals x squared minus 4x minus 12. So you can either click in these buttons on the calculator, or you can use your keyboard. And I will talk about how to do the squared, but it's basically shift 6 to get the caret, what we call a caret symbol. And so you can see what's already happened is that we have a graph here. What's really helpful about this graph is they have already given us some key points. I want to do that. I'm going to highlight all those points. So you should already know what these points are. We know this point down here is our vertex. We found that ourselves. We know that we already found that this is our axis of symmetry. And I'm going to talk about what these other 3 points are. They actually ask you about this one. This point is called the y-intercept. So this is question number 5 on your lesson, is this point. So what I would recommend doing is graphing this and using the graph to find your vertex, your y-intercept, and then if they ask you about these, they're not going to right now, but later we're going to talk about what these points are. So this is kind of the process that you're going to need to take. And then the rest of the questions actually have you pick a graph that matches the correct graph. So you already have, if I were to be looking at this graph, I could easily match this with the question in the lesson by just matching up the points and making sure that the points are in the right place. So that is what you need to do the questions in lesson 3. So I'm going to close this video out.